And now I would hand over to a man who is dealing with a very hot task. So we have great expectations about your speech. Please, Mr. Alexandre Makaronidis. He is the head of the European Task Force for the implementation of the EPSAS. Please.
Thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, back in 2011, the European Commission decided to launch a project which is aimed at harmonizing public sector accounting standards across and within EU member states. So the question is, why do we need actually this project? Simply because there is a wide range of public sector accounting standards and practices across the EU, and all these results in a certain lack of transparency and comparability in financial reporting. And this lack of transparency and comparability is actually due to non-comparable, incomplete, and inconsistent primary accounting data. And this is a problem which impacts on both general purpose financial statements and also government finance statistics. And you may know that with the Growth and Stability Pact, the EU put in place a coordination and surveillance mechanism, according to which member states should stay below 3% of deficit, 3% relating to GDP, and 60% of debt always in relation to GDP. So here just quite a clear impression. This is from a study conducted by EU on behalf of the European Commission. And this is just to demonstrate how different accounting practices in the EU are, from full, let's say, from pure cash basis to full accruals, and for all what we statisticians refer to as the subsectors of general government, that is central government, state government, where this does exist, local government, and social security funds. Maybe I should have added that the European Commission itself, who compiles also the accounts and consolidates the accounts of all EU agencies and institutions, is itself accruals-based by reference to IPSAS. All right, so, and this is the background of this project, work that started in 2012, following an invitation by the so-called Budgetary Frameworks Directive. This was a piece of legislation, part of the so-called six-pack, comprising quite a number of measures that the European Union put in place in order to address and contain financial crisis in Europe. And this Budgetary Frameworks Directive invited the European Commission to assess the suitability of the international public sector accounting standards for the purposes of our EU member states. So Eurostat then was invited to carry out this assessment in behalf of the European Commission. And what we did was, first of all, that we launched a public consultation to take on board as much as only possible concerning public views and opinions. We put in place a task force with public sector accounting experts from EU member states. And then we also gave a study to EY on public sector accounting standards and practices, and this was quite a large and exhaustive stock-taking exercise across the Union. In the end, in 2013, the European Commission submitted its report to the European Parliament and the Council. And there were two key conclusions in this report. The first one was that the IPSASs cannot easily be implemented in EU member states as they stand. And on the other hand, we also put forward the proposal that the IPSASs could be used as a reference framework for developing European public sector accounting standards. The next step was then a quite large conference on EPSAS organized in Brussels, where we managed to get together all key stakeholders across Europe, including IFAC, the IPSAS board, IMF, and other global stakeholders. And then we then prepared the next phase of our project. So from mid-2013 onwards, where actually we have started the actual work preparing the ground for harmonizing public sector accounting standards in Europe. So now the way we have organized the project is like that. We have put in place an EPSAS task force, EPSAS governance. That is again a working group with member states experts working on governance issues. And this is because one of the key conclusions in this EPSAS conference was that EU governance was a key issue towards harmonizing public sector accounting standards in Europe. We also put in place another task force working on more technical issues concerning EPSA standards. We launched a second public consultation, always on this key issue of EU governance for public sector accounting standards. And then we contracted out a further study, this time to PwC, who have looked into, in concrete terms, into difficulties for implementing the currently existing 32 IPSA standards in the EU. And the second task that they had was to try to provide an assessment of cost of benefits of this reform. In addition to this, the Commission has also been working on an impact assessment, again reviewing the whole aspect of the reform concerning benefits and then costs then to member states in the end. This with a view to preparing a Commission communication, and this Commission communication is meant then to prepare the ground for concrete legislative measures in the future. All right, then maybe a few words on the timeline and the way we think that we should structure the project. What you see here is not really a roadmap or an implementation plan in the actual sense, but this is simply the way the current state of our thinking, also following our discussions with our experts in the two task forces we have put in place. So, and if you look at it, so red, this means development and standard setting, and the green means implementation. So, as agreed, the first thing and the highest priority is to put in place the appropriate governance structure and the due process for developing standards. Then we would like also to launch an exercise, at least in those member states and governments that they are still on a cash basis of accounting, to start working towards opening balance sheets. The second batch of measures, and there is large agreement on this, should be focused on issues that are seen as key priorities for public sector, such as taxes, social benefits, and pensions. And of course, we also know, and we are in close collaboration with the IPSAS-B, that IPSAS-B are also working in parallel on these issues, and we hope very much that it will be able to benefit from their work again. So the next step in this project would be then reviewing and going across all the remaining IPSAS standards. And the last thing in this process, but presumably one of the most important ones, is the consolidation issue. Because this consolidation issue is really a key thing in providing good numbers to the policymakers and for ensuring consistency between the two financial reporting frameworks, general purpose financial statements and also financial reporting in the sense of government finance statistics. All right, and as a last thing, I would like also to report a few things from this PwC study, which we released recently on our website. As regards the first part of this work, the technical analysis of IPSASes, okay, there are two good messages in this work. First of all, that in general, the study confirms the technical suitability of the existing IPSAS standards, and this is something that we can only welcome. A second result here is that it confirms actually a classification of the existing IPSAS standards proposed already in the Commission report, that the IPSAS standards could be, for implementation purposes, classified into three groups. One group containing standards that can be implemented straight away, and another group with standards that may need here or there some revision or adaptation, and finally a couple of standards that were considered as necessitating revision and reform. And to make these short, these were mainly the standards concerning financial instruments. Okay, the next part of the study, and this is one of the most important conclusions, the potential costs for implementing this reform at EU level were estimated something between 0.01% and 0.05% of GDP. It's quite an amount, but on the other hand, I need to stress that this is within the range of the first cost estimate provided in our Commission report to the European Parliament and the Council. And the second thing, that this is roughly speaking about the half of this rough cost estimate that the European Commission provided in 2013. And then, of course, very, very important to close with it, this also confirms our expectation that the overall benefits would outweigh the implementation costs. And we, of course, understand that the costs of this reform are quite significant, but on the other hand, they should be rather for the short term, and I think that all of us need to understand that the benefits of this reform are for the long term, because the benefits would be really transparency and comparability. It would be more accountability, better and more sustainable public finance, and in the very end, this would be and provide also more intergenerational fairness. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, as we see it, we think that EPSAS is an investment for the future, and with this, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I would also like to thank the organizers for inviting us and giving us the chance to present our project. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Alexandre, for your clear and up-to-date insight into what's happening at the EU level. Of course, I would have many questions for you. Your presentation gives us hope for better accounting systems in Europe, but I would say it also raises more and more questions and somewhat concerns about what is happening. But I would like to keep first questions coming from the audience. Please, you're welcome.
Patrick Kabuye is my name. Sorry.
Oh, you are two.
Okay.
First.
Good. And thank you, Alexandra, for sharing with us useful information about the EPSAS. But I'm a critical supporter of adoption of the IPSAS in Africa, and you made a statement that saying IPSAS is not suitably implemented in Europe as it stands. And I just wanted you to clarify, because that may cause some concern for us promoting the same IPSAS in Africa, to say what are those things that you're worried about in IPSAS that we need to be considering in Africa as we implement this useful reform? And secondly, I'll be curious to learn from you or some tips or anyone else within the panel. How do we manage this conflict of saying IPSAS, EPSAS within the global environment? Because there is a clear message. Why are we then not adopting IPSAS? We want to adopt EPSAS. And that process is causing some confusion, and we would really like to know about it. Thank you.
Please.
Alexander, thank you very much for your presentation, much appreciated. My name is Vernon Saw. I'm with the Institute of Chartered Accountants, England and Wales. So we are in Europe and a very interested participant in this. Could I just ask you, for those countries within Europe that are already on accruals basis, so for example, the UK uses IFRS, modified in some aspects using IPSAS. For those countries that are already on accruals accounting, what is your view as regarding the mandatory nature or not of EPSAS? Because obviously some countries have already gone through a big conversion process. And secondly, do you envisage the European Commission changing from IPSAS to EPSAS? Thank you.
Please.
Okay. Thank you both for your questions. If I may start with the first one. We don't see any conflict between our EPSAS project and IPSAS. We need to understand, first of all, that there are certain particularities in our EU context when we go about harmonizing public sector accounting standards. Because I explained also the importance of financial reporting in the sense of government finance statistics and also within the context of the growth and stability plan. And we must also understand the importance of these figures and these numbers from the growth and stability point of view, because member states who systematically go above the so-called Maastricht criteria, they need then to go through certain adjustment programs proposed by the European Union, and this may be quite a severe exercise in some cases. The second thing, and partly answers also the second question, EPSASs are meant to be legally binding standards. We must understand that. And given also the EU context, we need also to understand that there must be a certain legislative process in place by means of which and through which the standards will be then endorsed and turned into binding standards for the European Union. So it makes quite a difference though. And then referring to the implementation of IPSASs and whether there is, let's say, some sort of contradiction between the statement that IPSASs cannot be implemented as such for the purposes of the European Union and proposing then European standards. The way we see it is, of course, there have been many of public sector reforms moving from cash to accruals. And many, if not most of those, were in one way or another based or inspired from IPSASs. But at least to our knowledge, there is hardly any such reform that can be said that it is fully or 100% compliance with IPSASs. So the way we see this, if I say this in a different way, it is one of the possible ways for looking at the EPSAS proposal and initiative is that EPSASs may be seen as a European Union interpretation of IPSASs. And having said that, I might maybe add that the European Union would like also to reserve its rights, if and where necessary, to deviate from IPSASs or develop own standards in case that there is no IPSAS standard in place, and for whatever reasons the EU may see the need for such standards. All right, so then back to the second question concerning member states with very mature and advanced public sector accounting systems. The way we are trying to structure and design this project, it's also aiming at achieving exactly that member states with advanced public sector accounting system will not be required to change anything until we have brought, let's say, all member states up to a certain level, and EPSASs will have been endorsed in a way that can be then implemented altogether in the next phase. We are not, let's say, planning, and we would not risk jeopardizing any of the mature and advanced systems that do exist in the European Union for the time being. Right, and then was the, if understood well, the potential tension between legally binding standards in the EU vis-à-vis reforms that have been carried out in member states, and potentially also reference to other standards like the IFRS. One of the objectives of this program is also to achieve a certain consistency between the macroeconomic accounting standards, such as the ESA, that is the European version of SNA, the GFS framework, be it in the IMF version or the European version in the form of the Government Debt and Deficit Manual, the IFRS, and IPSASs, because we wouldn't like, let's say, to have, if it's not absolutely necessary, any significant divergences between the various standards that do exist for the time being. Otherwise, the whole consistency issue would not be achieved. And we should also keep in mind that, at least in the way that the European Union goes about defining general government, this means that there are also a lot of entities reporting under private sector accounting standards and potentially IFRS that are classified into general government and need then to be consolidated up to the general government accounts. And therefore, consistency between all these sets of standards is a key issue in this project.